introduce myself, my name is Essentia. I am a senior civil engineer and project manager at Hatch. I'm also the chair of the SAICE Diversity and Inclusivity panel. In setting the scene, we thought it was important to just first pause to understand why we're here today. So our conversation seeks to address a number of questions. Various research studies have shown that the organizations need to be committed to being more diverse and inclusive if they want to achieve long-lasting business success. So how can companies cultivate a diverse pipeline of young professionals as well as nurture an inclusive environment? How can skills transfer, knowledge sharing, and mentorship be implemented in an unbiased manner to grow a diverse pipeline of young professionals? What is the role of industry associations such as the South African Institution of Civil Engineering in promoting an inclusive and diverse industry for young professionals to grow? And furthermore, what is the role of young professionals as our future leaders and as advocates for change in fostering a diverse and inclusive industry? Our speakers will unpack these topics as well as many other topics as we go through the session today. It's also important for us to just pause and firstly define what do we mean by diversity and inclusivity, so we all have a common understanding. So broadly summarized, diversity is having a culture that values uniqueness, i.e. people of different backgrounds, genders, ages, languages, races, and other differentiating factors. It's important to note that diversity not only refers to gender, although gender diversity forms a very big part of this, especially in the context of our industry, given the inequalities in our industry. So what do we mean then by inclusion or inclusivity? We will use this synonymously throughout the session today. So inclusivity is inviting diverse groups to take part in the organization, as well as establishing a working environment where everyone is valued and is encouraged to contribute. Someone said that diversity is being invited to the party and inclusion is being asked to dance. Some of the steps that we of SAICE have taken in our diversity and inclusivity journey is establishing a diversity and inclusivity panel, which I'm the champion of. And this panel forms one of the pillars of SAICE's growing forward strategy. What this means to us is that we have identified diversity and inclusivity as an imperative for the organization as well as for our industry. And we therefore committed to driving different initiatives in changing or contributing to the diversity and inclusivity narrative. The purpose of our panel is to create awareness on D&I through similar engagements like this one today. We guide best practice as well as facilitate input to some of the challenges that our industry faces, as well as identify solutions that can be put in place towards improving our industry. The work of the panel is very important, especially given the inequality and disparities in our industry and the many other challenges that our industry faces. We as SAICE recognize that we can play a very crucial role in guiding the conversation on how our industry can become more diverse and inclusive. Part of our journey as SAICE on D&I, and I emphasize that it is a journey, we have articulated our commitment where we have defined who we are, what we stand for in terms of diversity and inclusivity, and what we hope to see, and the vision, and to also summarize a vision for the industry that we want to be in. This commitment from SAICE is cascaded to our branches, our divisions, our committees. We've also shared this to our members. You might have seen the posters on our different social media platform, specifically the poster to the right of the slide. We believe that diverse and inclusive work environments will make us more innovative as an industry. It'll contribute meaningfully towards our society's advancement. And therefore, our commitment is to contribute towards a diverse and inclusive engineering and built environment sector where everyone is a valued contributor with a sense of belonging and has equal opportunity to succeed. We also are committed to demystifying diversity and inclusivity as it applies to our industry and to nurture an inclusive environment which encourages quality and fairness. This commitment is supported by our CEO, Vishal Lichman, our executive board, as well as our president, Vishal Krishnadath. Our president has also dedicated his presidential term to diversity and inclusivity, and has given a number of talks throughout the year discussing this topic in the different engagements that he took part in. We believe that diversity and inclusion cannot happen in isolation. And this brings us to our event today, where we've partnered with the young members. We realize that the importance of including young people in the journey as we strive for diverse and inclusive and equal industry is quite important. And there's various research studies that actually support this. The UN Secretary General said on International Youth Day a week and a half ago that I urge everyone to guarantee young people a seat at the table as we build a world that is inclusive, that is fair, and that is based on sustainable development. This further emphasizes how important it is to bring young people into the conversation as we strive towards an inclusive future. So some of the statistics from research that we can draw on is studies have shown that approximately 62% of job candidates said they would turn down a job offer if an organization does not value workplace diversity. This also includes millennials, who are projected to make up 75% of the workforce by the year 2025. Diversity and inclusion is even more important to younger employees, and it was found that 83% of Gen Z job seekers believed an organization's commitment to diversity and inclusion was an important consideration when choosing an employer. This paints the picture that it's quite important that organizations need to be committed to diversity and inclusion, because it's not only the right thing to do, but it's also the smart thing to do. So some of the inroads that we as SAICE have made in our diversity and inclusion journey are summarized on the slide. And broadly summarizes, we've articulated our commitment to our members and our industry. We've shared our vision. We contribute. We have contributions by various thought leaders through articles on our newsletters and magazines on how the industry can transform and the reasons why we need to transform. We support research by academics on diversity and inclusion topics, with the intent that they will share the outcomes of their research with us to expand our knowledge base. We've also established a dedicated diversity and inclusion mailbox, where you can contact us on any proposed initiatives or suggestions of areas where we need to areas that we'll need to tackle. Also believe in increasing the visibility of women as role models and celebrating women's achievement. And we've done this in a number of ways. SAICE, through our branches, through our divisions and student chapters, has targeted initiatives throughout the year where they celebrate women, including the Women in Hard Hats event, which is an annual event by the Johannesburg branch, and it was held last week as well. This diversity inclusion event is also one of such initiatives. And the upcoming SAICE Durban branch event, which happens towards the end of this month, as well as the Pretoria branch event that happens as well later this month, only to name a few. So these are the different ways or different platforms where we've championed women and we've celebrated women's achievement. We've also partnered with the SAICE Education and Training Committee to identify any relevant training that we can roll out in D&I, in topics relating to D&I. So in keeping with the theme of Women's Month, I wanted to pause and celebrate the many achievements of women in engineering. And we didn't want to miss this opportunity to celebrate your achievements with many of you that are joining us today. We believe in shining the spotlight on women by celebrating their achievements, promoting their visibility. We're encouraged to see more and more women in our branches, in our student chapters, taking leadership roles within the branches and actually leading the different branches and student chapters. We see many of our branches and chapters profiling women on their social media pages. We believe in doing this, and by doing this, we're encouraging other women to take up careers in engineering, but also be encouraged and be inspired to see other women achieving so many great feats within engineering. As Marianne Walters said, you can't be what you can't see. And that's the reason why we advocate for the visibility of women. These are some of the initiatives led by our branches and our divisions and our chapters in the past year and a half, the ones that are shown on this slide, which were focused on elevating women in engineering. And as SAICE, we will continue to advocate for gender inclusivity in our profession, and we don't see this as being a one-time event. I wish to emphasize that as an industry, we are not where we should be. Much work remains to be done if meaningful changes are to be implemented. There's therefore a very long journey that lies ahead of us if true inclusion is to be achieved. But we believe that through our concerted efforts, through the different initiatives that we embark upon, this will go a long way in shifting the needle to create an even better tomorrow for our future leaders. Thank you for joining us today, and we really hope you have some key messages from the session. I will then hand over to Tsibo, who will take us through the rest of the program.
Thank you, Essentia. Thank you for the introduction, and welcome everybody. I am your program director. I am Tsibo Kwena. I'm a civil technician at Zatari and also vice chair of the SAICE Young Members. And I work closely with Michael Mhlanga, who will be presenting today. So this is not our first event that we're doing about future leaders or future custodians. We've done this before. We've done this with the CEO as well. Before we even start there, let me actually introduce my panel. I'm with Michael Mhlanga, Malani Padiachi, and Essentia Mahlangu, who just presented just now, and Kim Tim. And we're definitely going to have a lot of talks about inclusivity and diversity. So in the previous webinar that we had the CEO discussing with us about the key values of us becoming future leaders and how can we improve and accelerate infrastructure delivery. And in his conclusion, he mentioned these four pointers. We should continue to live the values and with learning. Sorry, can I repeat that again? We should continue to live the values, learn with meaning, think society when we create, design or construct, seek to help and capacitate, and our strength lies in diversity. And today, that's what we will be discussing even more. The objective is to inspire and promote more technicians, technologists, and engineers to continuously play a role in South Africa's infrastructure development and socially, environmentally, and economically as we grow forward together. And today we'll be discussing inclusivity and diversity and how do we make it inclusive for all of us to contribute positively. Now, I'm going to hand it over to Michael, who will be talking about the roles of young engineers or young professionals in the over to you.
Thank you, Tsibo. I think we are having network issues on your side, but thanks for that. First of all, my name is Michael Mhlanga. I'm the chair of the SAICE Young Members Panel. And I would like to start by acknowledging my fellow panelists, which is Malani Padiachi Saman, Kim Tim, and Essentia Mahlangu for championing diversity and inclusivity. I would also like to acknowledge all our SAICE members and all of you who have made it this evening and for this important discussion. The program manager, Tsibo, and all protocol observed. I must admit, when Essentia asked the YMP to join as panelists, I was a bit skeptical. Number one, we are not subject matter experts. And secondly, diversity and inclusivity is a sensitive matter to most people. Thirdly, I like my sleep. What's interesting from engaging in the planning and further educating myself, I began to also do an introspection of how diversity has affected me in my personal and professional life as a young engineer. I remember when I was forming the YMP committee, I received really good CVs from young energetic engineers wanting to join the YMP committee. Our criteria was simple. So most active members of SAICE would qualify to be on the National Young Members Panel. The committee voted for their top candidates, and I looked at it. And I said, you know what, our committee is not diverse enough. To my admission, I was looking at race and gender. The CEO of SAICE, who sits on our committee meetings as a mentor, then said to me, Michael, you should look into diversity of thought. I then did what most of us would do, look to our friend Google. And then he added, perhaps look into young engineers that work in government, in the private sector, like consulting, construction, banking, to join your panel. Ladies and gentlemen, as young professionals, we need to look into diversity of thought. As YMP, we are of the view that young professionals have a big role to play as future leaders and advocates for change. It starts with the education and goes on to the practical implementation of it, where we move from the theory and we see diversity and inclusion being practiced in the workplace and outside. As young professionals, we need to have a grassroots approach where we begin to go to schools and universities and educate learners and students about engineering and diversity and inclusivity. We have to capture the minds of other young people who are coming up. The mindset has to change for us to achieve balance. As SAICE Young Members Panel, we have a program that we run in Cosmos City where we go and speak to grade 9 learners just before they make a decision on what they want to choose when they go for matric. And when we do that, we educate them about civil engineering, and we empower them with knowledge to choose civil engineering as a career. We dismantle some of the stereotypes and biases that we all know about our industry. Many learners admit to hearing about what is a civil engineer and what do they do. We encourage more young females to become engineers. And through our student chapters, we host roadshows, and we are able to have direct access to these student chapters from their universities, at least the ones that have been accepted to study engineering. And we begin to share our experiences as young professionals. And most of the time, what we find is, as a young professional, when you go to speak to other young people, the message kind of resonates because you can relate with the lingo and also with the energy. As young members, I think it is important that we also occupy positions that are a bit of a managerial role in the industry where decisions are really made. Because we do have competent young engineers that are registered professionally with the Engineering Council. They have a lot to offer on these platforms. And YMP has an important seat at the World Federation of Engineering Organization, also known as WIFU. We sit on the Young Engineers Future Leaders Committee with diverse young engineers from Australia, China, Myanmar, Hong Kong, Ghana, Ethiopia, UK, France, Spain. And our chair, who's a young engineer, sits in Lebanon. It's a diverse and inclusive committee, and we have managed to achieve a lot so far in our collaborative efforts. And we have all never met. And this is through, obviously, the power of Zoom and social media. As a continent, we know that 70% of the population is young people. When we look into our organization, SAICE, about 40% of its members is youth. We feel that it is a significant number. The voice of the youth in current affairs, especially diversity and inclusivity is important. Also, as the future custodians, I want to thank you, and I look forward to the Q&A session and also the panel discussion. I'll end here. Thank you, Program Director.
Thank you for that, Michael. And you raised some good points. And we did sit in that meeting together last year with your young leaders. And we did discover that, yes, as much as we're going through a pandemic and we're able to actually connect through such platforms like Zoom, and we might all come from different places and we all different. However, we might face the same problems as young members. And that's what you are tackling there with the other leaders there, just to make sure that we are creating a future for us and that is sustainable. And thank you for that. So now we're going to one of our keynote speakers, who's Malani Padiachi. Malani will be actually touching on fostering diverse and inclusive organizations. Malani is the founder and chief executive officer of MPOT, PAMOT group, which includes subsidiaries in Africa and Lesotho, who are both consulting, engineering, and development companies. Over the past 30 years, Malani Padiachi has distinguished herself as an exemplary professional civil engineer and business leader. Malani has gained industry recognition for excellence in engineering. Her dedication to growing the industry, advocating for employment creation and investing in the development of young engineers, as well as gender mainstreaming. She also won the Gender Mainstreaming Award for investing in young women in 2020 and the coveted SAICE National Civil Engineer of the Year in 2018, amongst others. I'd like to welcome Malani. Over to you, Malani.
Okay. Good evening, everyone. Firstly, I would like to take this opportunity to thank SAICE as well as the young members for having invited me to participate in this panel. As Debo has indicated, my name is Malani Padiachi Salmon, and I'm the CEO of MPA MOT. It's a very interesting topic that I've actually been given, and I hope to take you through a journey. But before I do that, I would, to those young members in the audience currently sitting, listening in, I would have loved to have swapped places with you, because right now I don't necessarily think you fully comprehend the advantage that you have, particularly following the pandemic, in terms of how you could realistically shape a lot of the thinking and a lot of the thinking around business as well. In Essentia, as appropriately already covered the kind of connotations associated with diversity and inclusion and the definitions, I'm not going to dwell too much on that. But in preparing a presentation for you this evening, I myself did a lot of introspection in terms of understanding why have I embraced diversity in all its forms. And just to share with you a little snippet, I grew up in a very rural community. I actually founded my organization in the economic hub of South Africa, being Johannesburg. I've worked abroad for an international company for a period, and having gotten that exposure, came back and started my own organization. I was raised by my maternal grandmother. So from a generational perspective, I had her influence was very prevalent in terms of my upbringing. When we look at diversity and inclusion in the workplace, I think it's important, and I've looked at it on three fronts. The first being related to the gender, and the generational, and obviously the cultural diversity. specific to our sector, and I'm going to delve a bit deeper into that. On the gender side, and it's sector specific, I think it's often when we're shaping and we're talking about this, that we're also very mindful that it's not necessarily just a gender issue, but more, not necessarily just a female related issue, but more about embracing gender mainstreaming principles within the work environment. Because it is quite obvious that more frequently now, our male counterparts need to be considered in many instances, particularly where you have reversal of roles in a home environment, that they actually need to be considered. And it's for that reason I often put forward that we actually need to be considering both parties. However, given the fact that from a gender perspective, that the numbers within our industry are actually far less than what we would expect it to be, and we're actually making some serious initiatives in order to change that. There are certain considerations in the workplace in terms of embracing that diversity. The other issue I would like to very quickly unpack is the generational issue. And this is a very serious matter, because when you consider, in many cases, the sector that we're actually practicing in is very much a peer review process. And the one element that we actually ignore it quite frequently, particularly amongst businesses, is the fact that we do have a profile, a generational profile within the industry, which is a serious concern in terms of peer review. And therefore, we need to actually ensure that we are creating a very cohesive kind of environment where young members, as well as industry recognized specialists, can appropriately learn from each other in a very conscious and structured manner. I think technology has also added to some of those challenges in terms of how do you create these environments where there are learning opportunities and encourage it. In terms of a cultural kind of focus, ethnicity and religion play an important role. Unfortunately, the sensors in my office are going to be triggered every now and then, so I've got to do a bit of a song and dance here to get it activated again. But on the cultural element, getting back to that, ethnicity and religion do play an important function, particularly in the sector that we're in. And it is critically important that we embrace it in all its forms. The advantage that this brings to businesses is certainly something that cannot be ignored, more so because a lot of our project deliveries are actually in diverse, in communities in which diversity within an organization would actually lend itself to provide appropriate solutions and address them in an effective manner. So having unpacked the three kind of areas where diversity is critical in an organization, I also wanted to just share with you, what does lasting business success mean if we are to embrace this? And obviously financial rewards is the ultimate objective. But in many of my interactions and discussions, particularly with staff and surveys and polls that we've done, it's obvious that that's not necessarily, that might be the ultimate or rather outcomes from having considered various other elements as a final outcome. But in many instances, it's certainly driven by the fact that people do want great working environments. They do want to be heard. And more importantly, they want to actually have environments, and as was stated earlier, diverse work environments. I think it's also important that in order to create this lasting business success, that any interventions that are implemented in organizations are certainly taken into consideration, not just the gender issue, but the generational as well as the cultural diversity that you are creating. In and to be conscious of also the technological advancements that are taking place and how responsive businesses are to that change and what interventions are put in place to bridge that gap between within the organization. The other issue that I wanted to just dwell on is in terms of the fostering the diverse, inclusive organization, and how can companies foster a diverse pipeline of young professionals, as well as nurture an inclusive environment. So getting onto that topic, I actually think it's important to recognize the fact that in creating a diverse pipeline, the responsibility of that actually does not necessarily start with the organization itself, but more importantly, with the tertiary institutions. In order for us to achieve the numbers that we would like to be able to absorb within our own businesses, it's important that that actually starts at the tertiary institutions. Probably even beyond that, you know, we'll be looking at primary and secondary school learners. But more importantly, I think that businesses that often there's a gap between businesses and tertiary institutions. And bridging that gap is critically important to be able to attract and retain young professionals within the construction sector. It is important for young people, and I'm talking about prior to even deciding to choose a career in engineering, that they are actually introduced to the career at all levels, particularly in a work environment. And that's where businesses can actually play a critical role by encouraging students or learners at the primary and secondary school levels to actually get a glimpse of what it means to work in the sector. In terms of the supply and demand scenario, having actively encouraged many females to pursue a career in engineering, it's important that we have retention strategies in terms of ensuring that we don't lose them to other sectors. And that's always been a challenge in the past. Therefore, it is important for us to ensure that whilst we are chasing a transformational agenda in the sector, we also need to be very conscious and remiss of what exists in the sector. You know, I've recently been exposed to a number of graduates that are currently unemployed. And to me, it is important that we absorb all of them, especially now that we're sitting you know, with a situation where we're going to need all of those skills in the future. So therefore, in terms of strategies associated to retention, if we have put so much of effort into encouraging a very strong female participation in the sector, it's important that we actually absorb them all. And not at the expense of marginalizing anyone. I think that in a profession where you're faced with scarce skills, it's important that absorption is critical in order to retain. And more importantly, in terms of, we are now, you know, the impact that the pandemic has had on us has certainly created a very globally competitive market. So if these young professionals are not absorbed into our own businesses, the chances are that they are going to be absorbed elsewhere. So rather than losing them, I think in terms of a strategy going forward, it's important to actually ensure that we retain them within the country so that we can actually then be rebuilding and ensuring that on infrastructure delivery, that we have the requisite skills to do that effectively. On the cultural side, you know, in terms of the diverse pipeline, I think the important point that I would like to stress here is that in order to be responsive to and provide solutions in the area that we specialize in, the dynamics of the team and the cultural diversity of the team adds a lot of value in terms of the solutions that we provide, particularly on our projects. And we cannot afford to ignore that. It is therefore important to take heed of this and to pay attention to it and make it a very inclusive team dynamic so that there is contribution at various levels and from various parties. You cannot solve the solutions of rural communities if you yourself have not lived and worked in a rural community. Therefore, it's important to actually take notice of that and to actually encourage participation in some of these initial conceptual designs and conversations. On the, at management level, I think it's important to actually consider that many of us have unconscious bias. And more importantly, many of the managers are actually male. And one needs to recognize the fact that in a work environment, the perceptions that are created are very different to that which our male counterparts would have in a home environment. Therefore, I do believe it's our responsibility to change those perceptions. And I also believe that in unwiring and rewiring, it's important to also take cognizance of the fact that in many instances, a protective nature would generally step in. And therefore, there needs to be a lot of diversity training that's offered to within organizations to ensure that opportunities are provided irrespective of gender. I know a lot of the challenges that I'm faced with is largely related to the fact that many of the females feel that they are not necessarily given the opportunities to possibly go out onto remote sites, etc., or because of the fact that they are being protected in the process in terms of ensuring that their safety is paramount. We can certainly do this, but do it in a managed way. So therefore, at management level, we need to create an enabling environment. We need to actually have an open door policy. And more importantly, we also need to have open conversations and be able to be sensitizing and creating awareness. I think that also from we've got a legacy issue where there have been a lot of issues related to our past. And in many cases, whilst I'm not in expecting you to forget what has happened in the past, but more importantly, I think we need to build stronger. We need to build together, and we need to be very conscious of how this has influenced a lot of the stereotypical thinking as well, and have a very open mind. I also think that from a sensitivity perspective, if you create a work culture where people can actually laugh together and laugh about all of the challenges that they faced with and be able to share openly, you would then be able to understand individuals, and you would be able to forge and create something unique within your organizations. It's therefore, in terms of the inclusivity, it's important for us to embrace not just gender, as well, not just specifically gender, but more importantly, the generational issues, which I believe is a serious matter currently in our sector, as well as the cultural dynamics and the importance of having diverse teams that would add to ensuring that we actually providing businesses that are sustainable going forward. I would like to thank you. I think I've overstepped my time, and I would like to once again thank SAICE and thank the young members for having me on this panel, and I'm really looking forward to some of the discussions later on. Thank you,
Malani, for that. Very informative. You actually covered quite a lot, and we like the way you actually covered the culture side, the management side, the business side, and the culture side, just making sure that we actually use empathy to make sure that, we actually understand every single person that we're working with there. And that we should also have the open door policy, and we should also be open-minded as individuals as well. And but we'll touch more in more detail into this when we have the panel discussion. I've got a couple of good questions for you there, and I'm sure also people definitely, and I'm sure the viewers also do have questions. Just to remind the viewers, please do not forget to add your questions in the Q&A box. on the right-hand side, and then we'll address that later when we have our Q&A session. So now for the next speaker, we have Kim Tim, and she'll be talking about growing a diverse pipeline of young professionals. So a background about Kim Tim, she's a dedicated structural engineer who's passionate about the role of mentorship in civil engineering. She has a master's degree in structural engineering from the University of Stellenbosch, was a nominee of SAICE Young Engineer of the Year, won the SAICE Mentor of the Year, and was recognized by SAPSA as the Professional Woman of the Year 2019 and 2020. She has recently co-authored 2 papers presented for IABSC in France, and has worked on a wide range of award-winning structural projects, from power stations to commercial office blocks. She enjoys working on projects throughout Africa in a range of different environments. She is currently the technical lead for ACOM structures in Gauteng office in South Africa. And I'd like to hand it over to Kim to present her side. Over to you.
Thank you very much, Tsebo. Thank you for that introduction, and to SAICE for the opportunity to talk today. As you've all heard, my name is Kim Tim. I'm a structural engineer at AECOM, and I've been asked to talk a little bit about skills transfer, knowledge sharing, and mentorship, in particular with respect to growing a diverse pipeline of young professionals. So to start with, I'd like to conduct a quick poll. You'll see it appearing on your screens. So please feel free to click a response on there, and we will come back and talk about it in a little bit more detail once we have the answers coming through. So please feel free to carry on clicking. While you're having an opportunity to go through and select the poll solutions, I'm going to make a few sweeping generalizations, to be honest, about young professionals. And they come from things both that I've learned going through the process myself and through those that I've mentored in the last 18 or so years. Now, I realize not all of these points will necessarily be applicable to every single person listening in today, because effectively we're all individuals and individual cases are different. But overall, I found them to be true. So I found that largely, irrespective of gender or race of a young professional, mostly they're looking for the same things. In fact, the same 4 things. Firstly, they want an understanding of their future career path. They want to know where it can lead and what their different options are that are available to them. Secondly, they want exposure to a wide range of situations and opportunities, so that they can really feel that they're learning and they're growing, rather than just being stuck in the same repetitive job again and again and again. Thirdly, they want to be accepted. They want to be valued and encouraged for their individuality and appreciated for what it is that they can bring to the party, rather than being just forced to conform to a system or culture that may feel alien to them. And finally, they want someone to be in their corner, to support them and guide them, a mentor. So at this point, I'd like to just go back to the results of the poll so that we can get a bit of a feeling for the people who are watching and see how the mentor-mentee relationships are for the various people who've been watching. I'm not sure if we can see it on the screen.
Sorry, Kim. It may seem like we might have a little bit of a problem with the poll, but it'll pop up just soon. Just give us a second.
100%, no problem at all. Okay, so I've spoken briefly now about 4 items that I find that a lot of young professionals want. Now, that doesn't necessarily mean that they are all needs per se. You don't need them in order to survive. You don't need them to actually grow in your career. But in most cases that I've found, the more of these wants that an organization or a company can provide, the more likely the young professionals are to grow and flourish. Now, some items are fairly achievable. That's quite easy to organize from the company side. You can identify potential career paths. These can be documented and discussed with the young professionals on a regular basis. Other items of these are a little bit harder though. Sometimes when the projects are going at full speed, you need to be able to do things quickly and efficiently. And this can mean that you want the young professionals to do something that you know that they'll be able to do, and it ends up being something which is possibly repetitive. Maybe you get put into boxes and you're expected to perform according to that box. And that can be quite frustrating. But when the pressure is on, you need to be able to work and put your head down and get things done. And it's going to happen. It's perfectly appropriate, and it's the nature of the industry that we're in. But when there is a slight easing of that pressure, to me, what's important is that the discussions and the exposure and the supporting must continue again. And that's largely where the mentors come in. Now, mentors aren't a magic wand. This isn't a Harry Potter moment where you can just wave them around and everybody's problems will go away. But a good mentor can really make a substantial difference in a young professional's life. If you can find a mentor who can support and understand and guide each young professional, then those professionals will feel listened to and understood and appreciated for who they are. This ideal mentor would then be able to encourage the mentee in how to handle the wider professional environment and tailor it for the individual, because we all know we don't fit into neat little boxes. As we typically relate easiest to the people who are most similar to ourselves, it would be even better if these ideal mentors could be representative of the race and gender diversity that we are hoping to develop in engineering in South Africa. Now, I've mentioned the ideal mentor several times now, but one of the main problems is that these mythical creatures don't really exist. We don't have a wide enough range of diverse mentors currently available to be able to pair up with each individual mentee. If people are keen and excited to become a mentor, they can be trained to be a mentor. It might even come naturally, but you cannot force people to be mentors. If either party coming into that arrangement is unwilling, it's not a relationship that works. And I would hazard a guess that even some of the professionals listening today are not necessarily mentors themselves. Now, if the poll is currently at a working state, shall we pop it up now and look at the answers? If not, then I'll just carry on. Okay. So if you have a look at the poll and the reactions that we've had, it's quite interesting to see that a third of the people here are already professionally registered, which is absolutely great. It's slightly sad that no longer have a mentor, because to me, albeit that the relationship changes, it is still useful to have somebody that you can talk to and be in your corner, even once you are professionally registered. What's unfortunately also not that surprising is that a third of the people aren't registered and have never had a mentor. And basically that just reinforces what I'm saying in the fact that there aren't enough mentors at the moment to be able to go around. Some companies have enough mentors, but in others, you might find you have 20 people and they're all sitting officially under the auspices of one mentor. And it's not really possible to have a true mentor-mentee relationship in this regard. And invariably, if you have that situation, people will feel and will be left out. Mentors, through no fault of their own, will inherently favor the people who are most similar to them, and others then feel left out. And it's rather the nature of unconscious bias, as Melanie has already covered. So this can cause problems. We've covered the fact that there are not enough mentors, and certainly not enough diverse backgrounds to suit all the young engineers and to make it easier. So where do we go from here? Now, both the company and the individual have things that they should do and can do. When a company signs a commitment and undertaking with EXA, it's promising to ensure young professionals will be suitably trained and they'll be mentored towards their professional registration. It can happen though, especially in difficult economic times, that The companies are so focused on trying to keep their doors open and their heads above water that they can lose track of the importance of training the young professionals. Despite this, though, the companies do have a responsibility to the young professionals to do their best and to give them the training necessary to register and try to ensure that there are mentors either internally or even externally. So I've spoken a bit about what the companies can do, but as an individual, don't think for a moment that you can now just sit back and expect to have everything organized for you. You are the primary person that is responsible for your own career and your own growth, and you need to ensure you're looking after it. Nobody else will ever be as invested in your career as you will be. So what can you do about it? So I do have a few suggestions. They might not all be applicable to everybody, but some of them are at least a starting point. If you don't have a mentor and you cannot get one within your company, and you've tried, you've spoken to your managers and they're not being very useful, go to places like SAICE. There are also other organizations, but you can find from them, are there mentors on the mentor role who are potentially available? Maybe they have spare opportunity and you can team up with people. There are other options than just trying to continuously go to your same manager and getting the same response. But try your manager first. Then if you have a mentor, but they're always busy, they don't have time for you, lean on them to make time. Book slots in their calendar weeks in advance. They aren't going to be the ones chasing you for the discussions. You have to chase them. If they cancel the meeting, make another one. Sometimes you even need to guilt trip them a little bit. Remember that mentors as well they're people. They have frustrations, they have deadlines. It's easy for them to just bump this out because it's not urgent. But they have also committed to being your mentor and they need to maintain that commitment. If you feel, and this for me is one of the most common ones, if you feel that you're not getting the correct exposure in your job, you have to make it known that you're looking for the exposure. Tell your mentors, tell your line managers, tell your bosses. Make sure that they are well aware of the fact that you feel you are ready for more, and keep telling them, because sometimes these things can take time. And you need to feel secure that they are committed to finding you more as well. The one thing that I would caution though, when you are stuck in a situation where you are doing repetitive work that you find very easy, it is very easy to get bored. And when you get bored, you maybe don't focus as much and then you start to make mistakes. And if you are making mistakes doing the easy repetitive work, then your managers are going to assume that you're not yet ready for the exposure to the wider items. So make sure that you are doing the absolute best that you can for the work that you're given. Just keep reminding that you want more exposure. If you feel you're not being appreciated for who you are, you're a little bit lost, maybe you're overwhelmed and scared, and you're battling to find your way, it's a bit of a foreign environment or maybe a slightly odd company culture. It's very, very natural. Most young professionals, when they're starting, feel isolated to a certain extent, especially when you come out of a tertiary institution, which is reasonably supportive, and you start in the working world and you feel lost for quite a lot of time in the beginning. Now, something that I've personally found has worked very well for me and at different stages in my life as well. Find people that you can relate to. They might be in your company or across several different companies. Form a group of 4 or 5 of you and meet once a month or so and just talk. Not to complain, although, I mean, that will happen. We are all human, but rather to share the experiences. You get a feeling of strength and camaraderie from those kind of communities, which really does help you. I mean, not every minute of every workday when you're actually there and putting your head down and working, it's not always going to be a warm and supporting environment, but knowing that others are going through similar situations and that they have your back, it makes you stronger to face what you need to face on a day-to-day basis. Now, hopefully, in 10 years even, we won't need to have these conversations anymore. By then, most of you listening who are not already registered will have registered, and understanding the difficulties faced by the young professionals, I'm sure many of you will have committed to being mentors yourself. For those of you who are currently registered, please do think about volunteering to be a mentor. It really, really can help. You might think you don't know enough, that you're barely working it out yourself, but I promise you know more and you can help just by being willing to help. Certainly you can help the new graduates. And for those of you who haven't yet registered, but you have been working a few years, you have a role to play as well. Take the new graduates under your wing. They need you just as much as you need the people a few years older than you. And between you, we can develop a system where we start to get more people through. If we can do it right for the next few years, then the diversity of the professionals in our industry will increase. And with that, the diversity of the mentors, and it will make it easier for each new wave of graduates that we get. It does mean that for now, there will be challenges and misunderstandings and biases. But every time we manage to overcome a challenge or learn how to communicate better or just adjust those biases slightly, it gets easier for the industry as a whole. Thank you, Tshepo. That's largely what I wanted to say.
No, thank you, Kim. You actually made a lot of great points I also just recently found myself a mentor. For the past few years, I've been struggling to find my way in the career and what to do. And I had to join platforms like these, like SAICE, where you have to first meet people and attend some of these site visits just to understand what the career is about. And here's the funny thing about how I found my mentor in the pandemic, because it's no longer face-to-face where we meet at our SAICE branch meetings or lectures. We met through a discussion like this, where you have something you can relate with, persons coming from the same industry as you, and you can relate. And that's basically how you get yourself a mentor. So I do definitely encourage people to become mentors and mentor others that are actually coming, and do find yourself a mentor if you're looking for a mentor. And now we want to go into the panel discussion. Just because of time, I wasn't really able to actually introduce Essentia and Michael, but I'm pretty sure everybody knows Essentia and Michael. They're quite famous on these platforms and also on TV as well. So actually, just going back to the mentorship question, I would actually like to ask Essentia a simple question. In Essentia, may you please tell us about your personal journey on how you overcame diversity and inclusion challenges as a young woman in engineering, and please also perhaps touch on your mentorship for the past few years.
Thanks, Tivo, and incredible insights from our keynote speakers today. I certainly have also learned a lot, even as a panelist. So my personal journey is, I came into the industry in the year 2012, where the industry was somewhat different from, what it would have been for somebody starting 20 years ago. And there were pockets where you could see, more and more women in senior roles, and more women serving as role models for the rest of us. Whereas the reality for others that started before me, that was not the case. So I entered the industry at that point. In terms of my personal journey, and what I realize is diversity and inclusion, empowering women, it's not only a woman-only conversation. And Melanie actually touched on this. It requires men and women who are already in decision-making positions to be advocates and champions for women. And that was somewhat the key theme in my career. I've had mentors and sponsors from the first day I started working up to this day. And it has offered, tremendous benefit, and to some extent has accelerated my growth and development in the industry. And these are people that would advocate for me when I was not in the room. And that's quite important as well, because a lot of the unconscious biases, a lot of the obstacles and the barriers happen when you're not in the room. They're not staring at you in the face. They're not blatant like that. So the mentors and sponsors are the people that would advocate for you as well. And certainly that was my experience of the industry as well. And I think to some extent that insulated me against the many challenges that many other women are likely to face in the industry as they progress. So I think a key takeaway from my journey, touching on mentorship and as well touching on sponsorship, is in order for, if we want more and more women to succeed in the industry, men also need to be allies in addition to women, and we all need to advocate for the inclusion of women as well in the industry.
No, thank you for that. Thank you for that, definitely. And I'd like to actually ask Malani, because you've been in the industry for more than 20 years, and it wasn't as diverse as it is right now. So please share your challenges with us, and also give us a little bit of a journey coming to this point. And also from a business point of view, how can young professionals tap into mentors, coaches, or sponsors in the workplace?
Thanks, Paul, for that. Just a quick sort of journey. Firstly, I've been in the profession for 30 years. And as you rightly said, when I started out there, it wasn't necessarily the gender and transformational issue that I focused on, but more my professional abilities. And to an extent, I'm not sure whether that's changed me in my thinking in terms of even from a business environment, for example, because I still maintain it's your professional abilities that need to go before you, and everything else will follow. And I actually, when Kim spoke about mentors, I also want to just share with the young members that it doesn't necessarily mean that you have to have a single mentor. Your career path and progression is such that you might want to engage with various mentors. And that actually adds a lot of value to your training and, in terms of various areas that you would need to focus in. So don't necessarily be hooked on having a single mentor. And as far as in Essentia is concerned, what she mentioned is that the role that voluntary associations play and the importance of the important networking opportunities that present themselves, you should not really undersell that, because I remember very early in my career, still as a graduate member of SAICE, being actively involved with a lot of SAICE events. And those were, those definitely added to my wealth of knowledge that I acquired, and particularly from the older SAICE members. And in having both those relationships, it was always very easy following that to pick up the phone and to discuss challenges that one might be facing or unique solutions to certain problems, etc. So do not underestimate that. I certainly learned a lot from that. But I must also, just share with you that often as engineers, we tend to be focused in various elements. And it's important very early in your career development to understand where your strength lies. Not all of us want to be entrepreneurs. Not all of us want to be managers. Some of us want to retain that highly specialized skills and become specialists in their fields of expertise. So recognize that quite early on in your development. And if that is where you want to be, then make sure you move in that direction. And I seriously think that from a business perspective, it's important that we have individuals that are focused in different areas as well. So I'm not sure if I've addressed you, but my journey has been about changing my roles over a period from being technical to managerial and obviously entrepreneurial.
No,
and I
definitely.
often maintain I'm all three in one, actually. I'm not quite sure which is
you're actually inspiring
more
all of
important
us
than the other. Yeah.
Yes, because you're actually inspiring all of us, because you've actually done basically most of the fields, I guess another person who's kind of similar is Michael, because Michael, from a very young age, you're already starting to sit in boards. For example, now you're part of the SAICE executive board, and also with your young future leaders, young leaders. Please tell us about being part of these boards and the influential roles in the industry and how important it is for young people to be sitting in these boards, like Essentia mentioned earlier.
Okay. Thank you, Tsepo, for that question. So my journey has been also quite interesting because I was fortunate that having studied civil engineering at the University of Johannesburg, Auckland Park campus, we had UJ Civils, which was a student chapter that's registered under SAICE. So I was actively involved in that student chapter, and we had mentors. So these mentors actually, I would like to mention their name, but I'm not sure if they'll allow me, but the mentors then encouraged me to join SAICE and get exposure. So obviously, as a young African man, you're probably the first generation, and most of us, that's the case. So I saw the exposure at the student chapter level. And then this is something that I can use in my career, and it's also aligned to my personality. So I also saw myself as a leader, which is very important because you need to, as a young professional, see yourself as a leader. And so from that point, when I graduated and qualified, I didn't stop my membership from SAICE. I kept on being active. And the goal was not to be on the board or anything. The goal was to acquire as much information and to learn as much as I can from people that have walked a similar road or people that are in the space that I'm at. But what ended up happening, which is interesting, is you volunteer in organizations like SAICE. You kind of monkey bar to the next opportunity. And most of the time it's through people that are probably already in the organization that feel that there's a need for you to be active in maybe in a branch or in a portfolio that SAICE is trying to launch. So the idea then of being active, like Malani said, I think it's very important because from there, these opportunities started presenting themselves. And obviously being a young person, I seized the opportunities. And I knew that I have also people in SAICE who are mentors who sit in committees who would encourage me to say, no, go for it because you are building your softer skills. And then they would push me. So that also gave me the courage to push myself, also to put myself out there. And I think as young engineers, that's important. You need to put yourself out there. I didn't have it figured out, but I knew that with the mentors that I had around, I have something to fall back on. Those are the shoulders of the giants that I relied on. So then ultimately everything becomes a natural progression. And just to put a disclaimer out there, it's not a paid service, it's voluntary. But the idea is it has to be aligned with your passion for giving back to the industry and also your personal development and your personal growth and professional development as well. Because SAICE is an institution that's 101 years old. So you can imagine the amount of information that the institution holds. So I did my research and I said, you know what, this is the organization for me. I'm a civil engineer qualified and pursuing my master's. I think this is the home for me. I can learn a lot. And I found new friends. That's how I met Tebo. That's how I met Essentia. I've met Kim now. Malani, I've had engagements when I was in the Joburg branch. So the network keeps on expanding. And all I do is just leverage on my network. And the rest is the results that you're seeing. So I hope I've shared honestly my journey and it can inspire other people to be active within the organization. So thank you, Tsebo, for that question.
You're welcome. You're welcome. And just to remind people, please do add your questions in the chat box so we can actually ask the panel as well. And you can also get involved and get all the answers you actually need. Now over to you, Kim. Now, as a woman who has succeeded in this male-dominated industry, what can young women in the industry or young people as well in general do to prevent being overlooked? Example, promotions, salary increases.
Thanks, April. It is tricky. As a young woman in the industry, you typically find that you get put, well, I mean, looking at it from the woman's side, because it's the side that I know more about, but you typically get put under an immense pressure to be strong all the time. You're expected to handle your work, your household, your everything else. And you can find that you get put in a situation where you get loaded with more and more things, but it's fine, you'll handle it because you're a strong, independent woman. And there's almost this concept in our industry today that you have to be strong all the time. And I don't think it's appropriate. I don't think people should fall for this. You don't need to be strong all the time. Sometimes, sure, I wouldn't suggest bursting into tears in front of a room full of contractors. That's probably not going to be very beneficial for you. But rather than focusing on trying to be strong, because it's not always healthy to be strong all the time, rather look at knowing and understanding yourself. Be confident in who you are, understand your strengths, understand your own weaknesses. And if you can use that confidence to present yourself in a confident way, it becomes a lot harder to be overlooked. And that confidence ultimately does come through to the people around you, and they start to trust and rely more on the answers that you give them or the discussions that you have. And then more than that, don't give up. It does get easier. I promise it does get easier. As you gain more experience, it gets easier.
No, definitely. And from your side in Essentia, what are the key themes that you believe are most integral to diversity and inclusivity agenda for SAICE?
So when I started my talk earlier, I emphasized that diversity and inclusion is a journey, because the challenge with undoing decades of historic imbalance shouldn't be underestimated. And there was a question on the chat box of about why haven't we achieved as an industry any meaningful change at this stage. Again, it goes back to so much historic imbalance that it'll take us some time to even rectify it. So in terms of the SAICE diversity and inclusion agenda, we want to improve awareness on D&I as it applies to our industry. And we do that in a number of ways, through this event, through other initiatives which I mentioned earlier in my talk, through contribution via thought pieces on our different magazines, newsletters, and so on. We also want to continue to make diversity and inclusion a core part of SAICE's Growing Forward strategy. We've made it an imperative to say this is part of our strategy, and we're going to drive different initiatives as part of as how we grow SAICE. We also want to encourage equality and fairness, as well as raise awareness on unconscious biases. Sometimes, you'd be surprised at how many people are not aware of what unconscious bias is. And it's only through an increased or improved awareness that you can do anything about it. So we want to contribute to this industry, which attracts, retains, and promotes diverse groups, especially underrepresented groups as well. So we want to contribute to that vision. We also want to provide visible role models and that cater to our diverse cohort of membership. And lastly, but not least, we also want to contribute to the Sustainable Development Goals, specifically SDG number 5, which recognizes gender equality. We believe that this is important as well, and it's an enabler for SDG number 9, which is industry innovation and infrastructure. So in order for us to unlock SDG number 9, we have to tackle SDG number 5, which is gender equality. So in summary, these are some of the things that we wish to contribute to.
No, great points. You made a lot of great points, but one thing I didn't hear about inclusive and diversity is persons of disability. Where do they fit into this picture?
Yeah, so when we define diversity and inclusivity, we emphasize that it's not only gender, it's persons with disabilities, it's age, it's diversity in terms of age, it's diversity in terms of religion, in terms of other differentiating factors. So we don't only narrow it, we don't only see it as a box. When we talk about a diverse and inclusive industry, it covers everything. The emphasis is that everybody that's part of this industry needs to feel that this industry is for them and that they belong in this industry.
Thank you for that. Thank you for that. Now, this is more for people who have like parents. This one came from like an email, and they actually wanted to know, like, as a professional engineer and part of being a mother, perhaps how do you work around this being flexible, working hours? Would it be a solution for some? Or other advice for experience on how responsibilities towards family and clients have been negotiated. So basically, how is it possible to make it flexible in the workplace for them to actually handle family responsibilities and while they're also engaging with clients? Maybe from a business point of view, from either Kim or Malani.
I'm happy to catch that one. And then Malini, add in your bit. I think, so I'm the mother of two very happy, healthy and fun little boys. And I've got to be honest, it is at times extremely difficult to balance being a mother and working and everything else. No one's ever going to tell you it's the easiest thing. There are things you can do. Sometimes you can work reduced hours, but at the same time, you also need to be able to put food on the table. So that's not always an option. So it's, for me, one of the things that working from home has honestly helped, because it does mean that I can be a little bit more active, especially when you're trying to do homeschooling and working at the same time. But for me, I think probably the most important thing is, in this case, my husband, because he, rather than taking a more traditional approach of saying, oh no, you're responsible for, all of the home and house, we very much sat down and worked out a partnership of how to be able to make things work. And there's actually a lovely cartoon, which is freely available on the internet, which is called You Should Have Asked, which I would strongly suggest people read, women and men. Just Google it, it's right there. And it talks about the mental load, which is often sitting on women when they are working at home, not working at home, but in almost being project managers of the house as well. And I think for me, the easiest way is to acknowledge it and understand all that you're going through. Try and balance it with your partner as best you can and talk together about it. And be easier on yourself. You don't have to be the perfect mother and the perfect worker and the perfect everything else all the time. Cut yourself a little bit of slack too. You're trying the best you can. And that helps.
Thank you. And Malani, from your side?
Yes, Tebo. I'm obviously, I'm a mother of 3 young adults now. So they've been in this journey, both on the home front as well as on the business front for all the time that they've been around, but more importantly, also a mother of twins. So I do take my hat off to people like him in the current situation, because I can assure you, I don't think I would have survived with the homeschooling, etc., at this particular moment. So I'm glad that I'm now a mother of young adults and I don't have to deal with that. But just to focus on what Kim says, I mean, all of what Kim has said is correct. It's about the balancing act and about creating sort of shared responsibilities. But I think what also happens, particularly in households where females are in a profession that's quite demanding, I think you're actually creating an environment where without necessarily acknowledging it, creating the diversity and the thinking around diversity and the responsibilities and sharing of responsibilities by the very actions that you take in your home environment. For example, sharing of responsibilities, and you also creating a conscious, an environment where you are undoing or those conscious bias that communities tend to be faced with. And I sincerely hope that it should not necessarily be linked to the fact that you're in a stressful or high demanding profession. It should be something that needs to be unpacked in communities, irrespective of what you're actually doing. There needs to be a conscious decision in a home environment that, this might have been in the norm generations past, but in terms of where we currently positioned, it shouldn't be the norm. There should be a very concerted effort to change the way we look at things. Because at the end of the day, we want to raise boys that are actually also very sensitive to the fact that their partners or their future partners would be able to, they would be there to be able to support in the way that my husband supported me in this journey. And quite frankly, particularly when I started, I would never have achieved what I have today if I did not have that support. So we need to get our children to be thinking differently, and it doesn't necessarily have to only happen, happen in our homes. It needs to be beyond that as well.
No, definitely, I do agree. And, most of us are raised by like very strong women. For example, myself, I was raised by a single parent who was once a teacher, then moved into human resource development and raised my sister and I to this point where we are right now, and we're raised with certain values. However, coming from a young person's perspective, what actually, you spoke about like strategies that are there that we need to actually have to retain young women in engineering, and maybe persons of also disability as well. So maybe can you please like touch on these strategies and maybe what country policies, the regulations are required to accelerate transformation of the industry such that it is more diverse and inclusive as well. So we can actually continue the journey and say, okay, my dad is Michael, my mother's in Essentia, and you inspired to also become an engineer as well and want to retain, stay in the industry as well.
Okay. Sepo, I think you're fielding that to me, are you? In terms of from a business perspective?
Yes, that's correct.
So in terms of policies that are enabling to a large degree to retain individuals within the sector, I think it's important to accept the fact that particularly where we're looking at females in the sector, that there are certain one needs to be considerate of the fact that in many instances, when a female enters the profession, there are certainly times in her journey where there needs to be consideration, particularly when they're wanting to start a young family. I mean, I've always within my organization, particularly, and it might go against the grain of most other companies, is that it's important to recognize the fact that there would be a time where you would need that latitude to be able to focus and concentrate on your family. It is, sorry, I'm having this problem. So in those instances, there needs to be enabling policies, but as a business owner, you must also recognize the fact that when a person is an integral part of a team, it's sometimes difficult to be able to, resource appropriately, etc. So therefore, I feel that, policies that like encourage, opportunities to be able to incentivize companies to be able to retain females, particularly during those periods when they cannot be in the work environment and are focused on raising families, that we need to start looking at possibly, what is implemented in the Nordic countries. I mean, they have phenomenal policies around how organizations can benefit and obviously provide policies that's more conducive to retaining females, especially during that part in their careers, during those occasions. But more importantly as well, I think it's we need to also be looking at on the retention side. There are some serious competitors in the market, particularly when you look at, you ideally want people to pursue a career in engineering, stay in engineering, register as a professional rather than leaving to a lot of the management consultants or financing houses because they are in demand. And in those cases, I think, one cannot now suddenly, because a lot of the attraction in the transition to those to that particular career path is largely related to the fact of compensation and the attraction of earning more money. So there needs to be some conscious initiative by business as to how does one retain individuals to be excited about the profession, to ensure that. And when we're faced with an industry that's heavily discounting and competitive and not so regulated in terms of fee scales, etc., it makes it somewhat difficult to be able to implement strategies along in that sense. So I think from a policy perspective, certainly linking into what's happening across the globe. The retention of women at the point when it's most required, because you want them to come back and be able to take off from where they left. There should be some support over those periods. Apart from that, from a policy decision, the other ideas is really about what is the company's ethos, what is the company's policy in terms of ensuring that females are actually in senior management roles that do take up these positions. And also not just females, I mean, young professional males as well. There needs to be because if you promote one against a not consideration for the other, you're just going to create an environment that's not really conducive. You do want to create team dynamic that will actually elevate your company profile and status.
And on that point, I'd actually like to pass this one, just to continue from where you left off, Malani, onto Kim. How do we ensure equitable skills transfer and knowledge sharing within the industry?
So it's tricky. I don't think most people start off by saying that they're deliberately going to only give some skills and knowledge to certain individuals. I think what ends up happening is, as we've mentioned before, the unconscious bias topic has come up a good few times. And what ends up happening in group environments is that preference is given based on unconscious bias, or at least the skills transfer is not equitable because of that. So to my mind, the easiest way of trying to make sure that everything is evenly approached is for people to become aware of what their own biases are. And we all have them, we all know we have them. The question is just how aware of them we are. And there are actually, there are quite a lot of free web pages out there, like the Harvard Institution has one for unconscious bias, or they've got, it's another name, but they've got a lovely page where you can take an entire collection of tests and discover a little bit more about your hidden biases. And it may or may not be true. And obviously, in the realm of taking internet tests, I'm not suggesting you base your life on them, but it does help if we can encourage people to talk to other people and to understand their own biases. then at least they can take that through to the environments where they are doing training and they're doing skills transfer, and notice when they are doing something which is causing a non-equitable transfer of skills.
No, definitely. I do agree with you now. And I guess at times when you're a young graduate, you come in and you expect probably you to be like shown everything, and perhaps from your line manager side, they don't actually get to see that you're not really doing much. But I guess you might be doing the same job for, let's say, three years, and without communicating between yourself and your line manager, or let's say you're not having a mentor, I guess that's where that skills transfer could be a problem, because you're not actually being mentored in a way, let's say, to road to registration, for example. But all of us have actually made like good insights, and thank you very much. But now I'd actually like to open it up to the people who are viewing from everywhere else. So now the first question, sorry if I'm not pronouncing this properly, Mayur Kishore Hira. They're asking, dear Malani, you've mentioned that people in the civil engineering sector are being lost to other sectors. What are these sectors that they are going into? Additionally, are engineering professional organizations carrying out meaningful actions in retaining engineers, especially young people in universities? Many capable students drop out of engineering due to no support rather than being. I guess we kind of touched on it, but I guess maybe we can continue.
I think I explained, Zeppo, in my response that certainly into management consulting and financial services sector, that seems to be the biggest draw card of a lot of our professionals. In terms of the retention policy within our own industry, I think it's literally dictated by the fact that the earning potential is a lot more in those areas, and hence the inability for us to retain our staff to qualify as registered professionals. That can only change when if our sector, is able to grow and is able to retain such individuals. The business environment is such currently that it's not such a conducive environment, because you're quite aware that there's a lot of discounting. There's a huge backlog of infrastructure projects. So it makes it somewhat more difficult to be able to absorb and retain individuals. And therefore, there needs to be a very focused approach in terms of how we do that. And it's all about supply and demand. We've created the supply, but there's no demand at the moment. We do need to work on that quite actively. And I do believe that unless something is done about it quite quickly, we're actually going to be losing all of those graduates, because many of them that are currently sitting at home, unemployed, are going to probably end up pursuing something totally different and never, be coming to the profession. So yeah, it is a challenge, but unfortunately, it's not a challenge that we can solve on our own. It requires a very conscious and dedicated effort to create that demand. Yes,
definitely. Just to get into more questions here, Millicent Gama says, very insightful session. I'd like to find out how best future engineers from rural areas can be introduced to the industry. Anyone would like to take that one? Maybe in Essentia or Michael?
Okay, thanks, Zebo. I think, let me take this perhaps maybe with the experience that I had last year. So we received an email and a message from the community in the Eastern Cape in Bizana. So that email came to SAICE young members. So what we did is we then spoke to the executive of SAICE and said, listen, we want to respond to this email, and then we want to kind of understand what is the concern of the community. So being young people energetic, we went to the Eastern Cape. What a decision. So we went there, we met the community, we understood their needs. And then that experience, when I reported back now to the committee of what information I gathered, they wanted the dam. And then it triggered all.
Do you recall?
So it triggered all these issues, obviously, in our profession that, you don't just take on work and all these other things. But the learning curve for me there, maybe to answer Millicent, is I think that approach and going into those communities and being a volunteer, it made a difference because I have a relationship now with the community. I know their needs. So what I did is I said, okay, we'll try and sensitize government of your issues, because you wrote to SAICE, you could have written to anyone. But what we can do for you is we'll try and sensitize government and Department of Water and Sanitation, and so that they can attend to it. And we'll write a professional report for you, but we're not taking any responsibility. We're just communicating the message to say, okay, here's the challenge and this is what the community is facing. They're drinking water from the river, which we believe is not safe. So such, I think, youthful thinking and energy, I think, is what's required, especially in those forgotten corners of our country. So if, let's say, you know an engineer that, because SAICE has a lot of branches across the country. Some of the engineers are working actually in those areas. You can take the initiative, Millicent, to write to some of these branches and divisions to say, you know what, this is the idea. So the active part that Malani was talking about, that's the point really. Take an initiative, sometimes get the permission later. Thank you for that question, Millicent.
Thank you. I do agree with you on that one, Michael, that it's quite important that we actually do include people as well from rural areas, because these are underdeveloped, and this actually creates socioeconomic polarization, which basically means that, yes, us who live in the city have access to everything. You might be close to the car train, you might be close to the mall and shopping centers, but however, we're excluding those who live in the outskirts of the city, basically. So it's quite important that we actually are able to develop it. And now, can we just move on to one more question, because we're just kind of running out of time. Moya Kishore Hira again did ask again, to all speakers, in universities, many capable students drop out of engineering due to no support rather than being academically weak. Mental health of students in engineering industry faculty is concerning. What are the fields doing that make other fields more attractive that engineering isn't doing? Is mental health in the engineering sector overlooked, and is it not leading to discrimination? In Essentia, would you like to tackle this one?
Yes, I can tackle that one.
You're quite busy with a lot of stuff. You're busy with she engineers, studying, doing your MBA, working, and does that also affect your mental health?
So I'll answer it a bit differently, maybe from an industry perspective. I think we haven't done a good job in taking care of mental health issues. I think this is something that has been overlooked for many years. I read a statistics about the construction industry in the UK. I believe the suicide rates there were quite significant as well. That tells us that as an industry, this is something that we haven't been addressing. The trend that I've picked up now is, given the strenuous conditions that people are under in COVID times, it's only now that companies are actually taking notice. They're realizing that employees are struggling to cope. But it's unfortunate that it's taken us this long for people to get to a point of near collapse that industries are starting to normalize mental health issues. And a number of them are putting in different interventions. Some of them have in-house, counseling services. Some have these groups, safe groups or safe spaces where people can engage openly about the challenges that they're encountering in the industry. But these are trends that I'm at least picking up more in recent days than more historically as well. So there's still a lot of work to be done in terms of mental health and mental health issues in our industry.
No, definitely. And I would encourage all of us, especially us as the young engineers as well, that perhaps maybe Michael and Essentia, we can take the initiative to start something similar to what we have in our Grow Forward strategy, but perhaps for this main issue that we're talking about here, where, yes, we're talking about inclusivity and diversity, but let's not forget about mental health of others as well, especially in this pandemic. Thank you for that, Essentia. And then we have a comment over here from Stephen Kaplan, who was part of the SAICE executive team. Well done, panelists. This was a worthwhile discussion. I feel that we need two distinct types of mentors. Firstly, the pre-registration mentor focusing on guiding the young members, direct experience towards registration. Thereafter, the post-registration mentor should also focus more on the young professionals' career direction options. As Malani or Kim mentioned, not everyone is cut out to be a project or sector type manager or even entrepreneur. It's critical that each individual recognizes where their strengths lie, which may not always coincide with where the employer needs them for their best financial benefit. The career direction taken by each young professional is solely in their own hands. Thank you for that, Stephen. And we have another one which says, without a mentor in the workplace, how does one approach a manager in order to ensure that your tasks, training, and experience continue to build towards your career growth and goals? So from what we've seen, what Stephen is mentioning there is that the pointers of actually having a mentor, so pre and post registration. Perhaps Kim, would you like to touch on this?
Sure, no problem. I completely agree with what Stephen's saying. It's one thing to get a young professional who's recently graduated through to actually registering as an engineer in the industry, but a mentorship process does not stop there. And it is important to be able to grow and develop even beyond that point. And largely, once you have that little piece of paper that says that you're a professionally registered engineer, you still have quite a lot of decisions to make in terms of where your career is going to go. And having a mentor who you can go to and discuss, and it may be a different mentor, it may be the same mentor. In fact, I'm of the opinion that you should have different mentors for different stages of your life, depending on where you are at. And that ability to be able to talk to that person, especially actually if they are not trying to be your line manager as well, because otherwise the mentor needs to wear different hats depending on whether they're trying to think about what is best for you and help you discuss what's best for you, as opposed to wearing the business hat and thinking about what is best for the business as a whole. So a good mentor should be able to take off the one hat and put on the other one, but it's definitely beneficial to keep having, or at least to have a mentor beyond the registration process.
Thank you, Kim. And we have another question. Spare Madlala is saying, how do we maintain the balance between advocating for diversity while maintaining the core competencies of industry? In Essentia, would you like to tackle this one?
Sure. Thanks, Faye, for that question. So advocating for diversity and industry core competencies aren't mutually exclusive. So we're not saying by advocating for that our industry becomes more diverse, that we lose out on any competencies. What we're saying is we want to create an environment where everyone that participates in it has equal opportunity to succeed. And that does not mean that we pushing core competency aside and we promoting one over the other. We're saying we want everybody to have a level playing field such that they have the same advantages as well as everybody else in the industry. I hope that answers your question.
Thank you for that, Essentia. And then we have Jessica, sorry if I might not pronounce the surname properly, Ramchund. We see ourselves as engineers, as the faces of civil engineering in the country. Sadly, the public at large do not fully appreciate what we do. This dissociates the actions of the future custodians or the custodians of infrastructure and the ability of us to do impactful work we want to do. What more should we be doing in advocating for a louder voice for civil engineers? Michael, you and I are usually having these conversations privately, and also part of the strategy we plan for these next few years actually kind of touches this, and us sitting in, let's say, Webfield talks, and our plan on being part of, let's say, African advisory boards. Maybe perhaps can you touch on this one?
Yes, no, thanks, Tebo. I was actually about to message you to say, can I respond to Jessica? I think this is Jessica, also a champion from SAICE, I think. But thanks a lot, Jessica, for your question. I think we all know that there's a public disrespect, of infrastructure from our communities, which is obviously a challenge. But what we found as young members is the dialogue part is important. So, for example, with the Women in Hard Hats, we realized let's bring in government into the conversation because we need to talk. And from just reaching out and just also demonstrating that as young future leaders, we want to have this conversation where we table some of the challenges that we're experiencing. It got a positive review, actually, where now the commitments were made, where they are also trying to action some items with consultation, obviously, from us as SAICE young members. And the awareness education, I think, is also important. Sometimes you can make the assumption that people are aware, but they're actually not aware. So we then also recognize that that's also an important factor in our space. And we need to do more and make our voices louder, because what I then realized also from working in the public sector, engineers are always in the basement, especially the engineers that work for the public sector. And then all these decisions are being made by non-engineers. And then when things go wrong, you're the first to be called to provide a solution because they know that you have the capability. So it's an interesting dynamic, but I think the discussion that was done on the professionalism of the public sector, I think they touched on the points, and they encapsulated exactly the issue, and they provided the solution that, you know what, we not need to be seen as rivals in this space, because the ultimate goal is to provide infrastructure in the space. We must also be seen to be, equals in the space, and just to be compatible with one another. So I hope, Jessica, I answered your question, but I want people like yourselves as well to also, in your personal capacity, to assist in making the loudest noise in the small positions that you occupy. I think it's important. If we are all making noise as engineers, I think we'll go very far also in terms of also coming out of that basement that I mentioned earlier on. Thank you.
Yeah, definitely. I do agree with you there. It's a collective movement. You're not doing this all alone. You can see how diverse this panel is. And also outside of the panel, there are people who are coming together to make sure that the voice of civil engineering is also loud, and we're tackling a lot of things. We've had an Essentia and her team a couple of days ago being on business day representing civil engineers, that are young and the women who are hardworking. So we need more of these, to be honest. And one question that's left, I left this one because this one's the biggest one, especially because it's a pandemic and we do need money. So the question here is from an anonymous person. So Anonymous is saying, amazing session. Are there any plans to regulate salaries in the engineering sector to ensure fairness? So just to kind of touch on, let's say, what Michael did mention, that in the public sector, they won't take any responsibilities for the mistakes that happen. However, when it's good, they want to celebrate. However, the people doing most of the hard work is in the private sector, if I'm not mistaken, and the professionals. So, Melanie, I think you might be able to answer this one in terms of regulating salaries and ensuring the sector's fairness. Sorry, the sector's fair.
Hi, Sebo, that is actually a very difficult one. More specifically because what we currently faced with, and most businesses currently are looking at protecting jobs as a first priority, and we need to be very mindful of that. But leading on to also touching on the previous question, and I think it relates to that because the importance of our profession is definitely, from an awareness creation perspective, is non-existent. And I think in many respects, the kind of fees that we command, etc., is all directly related to that. And we do need to make a concerted effort to elevate that status. It would be very nice if we can adopt the engineer in front of our names just to give it a title. And I think that that's something that we need to be working quite actively to be able to get that in line. But from and I go back to the supply and demand situation and the opportunities that are created. And my concern is that, with the pandemic, obviously there's been major shifts in budgets in country. We're not going to see that rollout of infrastructure projects. So all of that has a direct impact on what businesses can afford and what businesses can actually promise, and in terms of increases and addressing some of the issues that would be key to retain individuals within the sector, does become a huge problem, particularly in these uncertain times. But I do believe it starts with a recognition of us as a professional within society and within the ability to actually assist, particularly government in order to deliver. And that needs a concerted effort. And I think it also needs a sort of a consolidated voice as well, because our industry is also very fragmented to a large degree. And we need to really, ensure that, and I'm very encouraged by platforms, such as this, that, and I like the fact that young members are taking ownership of certain things and moving, putting this agenda forward. And I think that in time would create that recognition of us in the profession. But I also just want to state that with the pandemic, what has also happened is the awareness in our communities. And, and that's something that will actually address not just our professional status, but also the issues related to diversity and inclusion issues related to professions that were typically very male dominated. So it actually starts in our communities, and the pandemic has given us an opportunity to actually influence our communities in terms of what we actually do. And in a very transparent and open kind of forum and discussion. And we do need to, and I like the Eastern Cape example that Michael cited. So we do need to be out there a lot more frequently, interacting with ratepayers associations and communities to be able to get that message across if we want we want to see change, and if we want to be recognized.
Yeah. No, thank you very much for that. And that's very insightful. I'm just looking at time, and we need to kind of wrap it up and make sure that we get everything together. So in Essentia, would you like to share your screen before I do the closing and saying thank you to everybody?
Certainly, there's been a bit of a conversation regarding SAICE Connect. We had actually prepared just one slide to just give you a bit of information on what it is. There was a discussion on how can you get more mentorship as well. So SAICE has established a platform for that. It's called SAICE Connect, and the link has been included on the chat box. So how it works is you register on the platform if you're a mentor and interested in becoming a mentor and mentoring others. You can register, and then if you are looking for a mentor and you are a mentee, you can also upload your profile as well. If you're also looking for employment as well, you can include your details there. And if there are recruiters looking to recruit civil engineers, they can look at the database and pick your information from there. So those are some of the initiatives that we've run with. There's also SAICE Academy as an institution. We are committed to expanding our knowledge base and providing training and providing you with enough information so you develop throughout your career. So there's SAICE Academy as well, and there's some information on that in our different newsletters. So these are only some of the initiatives that SAICE has, and there's a multitude of those that we actually running with. But if you are not a member yet and you're interested in becoming a member, do send your details to this mailbox. And if you are a member, then look at taking up any of our current offerings. Thanks, Thibaut.
Thank you for that, Essentia. We've come to the end of our very informative, webinar. First of its own for SAICE, and I hope that's not the last one. I hope we can actually continue to do more of these, and from here we actually need to put things into action. And one thing I can say definitely is that the key takeaway here is that we spoke about the business side of inclusivity and diversity. We spoke about the management side of it, the culture, and also making sure that you have a mentor, being open-minded, having an open door policy, and being diverse in such a way that we also need to consider rural areas. Is there something wrong with my signal? Or is everything 100%? Oh, okay, just on my side, show me a signal. And to also just make sure that we do take care of our mental health, because in the end, we do have people that we love and want to take care of. And that's the reason why we're doing what we love, because we're in a society of people. We are designing for people and building for people. And that's one thing we should actually recognize. And I really do appreciate all the speakers for being here and sharing a lot of information that all of us could take home and use and apply. Let's not forget to say, being part of these volunteer associations, let's lift as you rise. So the higher we go, we lift others who are coming just after us. And from my side, thank you to all the speakers, Kim, Malani, in Essentia, Michael, the team from VTV Productions, and Tabeleng, Mishka from the SAICE marketing team to make sure that people get this information. Thank you a lot. And thank you to everybody for tuning in and for all your questions. We look forward to seeing you guys at the next event, and adios.